Welcome to today's Open Group webinar, which I'm pleased to say is brought to you by one of our member organisations, Biz Design. Before I hand over to our speaker, Remco Blom, I'd just like to cover off a few housekeeping issues just to ensure the quality of the event moving forward. One of the objectives of these events from the Open Group is to have a dialogue with the attendees. So we would encourage you all to ask questions when it occurs to you. The way to submit a question is via the QA text facility in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. When you submit a question via QA, can I ask you to address it to all? That way everyone gets to see all the questions that are being submitted. Co will handle all the questions at the end of his presentation. You may also be pleased to know that this event is being recorded. So if you have any local technical difficulties or we have to leave the event early, then you'll be able to revisit this whole event, both in video and audio, from tomorrow. You will all receive an email with a link where you can access this recording. Remco, if you're ready, I'll hand it to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everybody again to this webinar on case experiences using ArchiMate. First agenda, we will introduce ArchiMate for those that are attending this webinar and are familiar with ArchiMate yet. And for this brief introduction, we will discuss three cases. One of them made insurance company, one out of public sector, and one about a steel industry organization. Case will present business profile, the challenges they were facing, how GA and ArchiMate, and lessons learned, and we will conclude with comments and tips how you might apply ArchiMate in your organization. We have about an hour to do this, and please free to do submissions over chat. We have 2 points, somewhere halfway and somewhere at the end, where I will try to answer all these questions. My name is Blom. I work for Biz Design as a senior consultant. Biz Design delivers tools for designing enterprise architecture and business process management. I'm a consultant, mainly focused on enterprise architecture. We also have training, like TOGAF training and ArchiMate training, and we support practices and open standards, of which ArchiMate and TOGAF are very important, of course, to us. Do you recognize this? You probably a process architecture, a product architecture, a technical architecture, and an application architecture. But the important is to understand the relations between all these various architectures, and that is ArchiMate is focused on the relations between the various domains, and then of course be able to analyze relations and create roadmaps. So ArchiMate architecture is about analysis. It's an open standard for end architecture, and it's on relations to be able to visualize things for stakeholders. So enterprise architecture is either as both a discipline, something that you do in your organization with the objective to steer changes, but it's a step-by-step way of working is supported by, for instance, TOGAF, but there are also other methods that deliver this process.
Sorry, Simon, can I just interrupt quickly? Can you just move your microphone away from your mouth a little bit?
Yeah, sure, thank you. Is this better? This is better now. So I just more focus on the product of enterprise architecture. So it's about the delivery of models. And these it shows the coherence between the various domains in your organization, the products, the processes, the information, and the infrastructure. To have a complete enterprise architecture approach, you need to have both. So you need to have something, a method for the process of enterprise architecture, and you have to have language for enterprise architecture. And to meet with viewpoints in the process, you need to be able to deliver various viewpoints, and therefore you need the language, and that's where ArchiMate is focusing on. ArchiMate really is a language to describe enterprise architecture on the business layer, the application layer, and the technology layer. And it is a graphical language with formal semantics, techniques for visualization and analysis, and it is an open standard, so it's very much connected to TOGAF as well. It is free available on the website of the Open Group, so I encourage you. We also give this hyperlinks at the end. I will present them again. To contribute to the community and also to use anything that is already there at the website of the Open Group at archimate.org, at LinkedIn, all these places where you can find more information about ArchiMate and also best practices. So it's a language. You to be able to model your domain on a certain high level, and you are able to read these domains. So how are applications connected to my processes? How are my applications deployed on infrastructure? How are my processes supporting the various products and the various lines of business that I have? That sort of questions you want to ask, and that sort of stuff you want to be able to visualize. Of course, if you have these connections, you can also answer questions like impact of change. What's the impact of change? Therefore, ArchiMate provides a set of analysis. It also relates to other standards, for instance, UML and BPMN, so that you're able to reach your high-level models to the lower-level models, or the more detailed models in your organization. So our three layers: the business layer, the application layer, and the technology layer. And since this is a language to express different things on these layers, you want to talk about subjects, things that can do something, active structure. You want to express what is happening in this layer, and objects are actually undergoing this behavior. So this is a very brief introduction of the core concepts of ArchiMate. On the layer we have these various domains: information, process, and organization, the product domain. On the application layer we have a few domains, and in the technology domain. And per domain, ArchiMate provides us with a set of concepts. On the business layer we have concepts like role and actor on the right. These are structure, things that can do something in the organization. We have behavior, in which we express our business processes and the business services that are realized by these processes. And with business objects that undergo the behavior. So with the business object, we are able to express the information and how the information relates to other information and how that relates to our processes. Many organizations, sure also in your organization, processes are using extra visible functionality of applications. Therefore, you also want to model application layer in terms of application services, application functions, the components that implement these functions, and the interfaces that relate to components, but also are there to relate or to be able to use the applications from a business perspective. Of course, there's also data, the information on the application layer. On applications, you might want to model or you might want to express how these applications are deployed on your infrastructure. Therefore, we have concepts like infrastructural services, software, devices, networks, and also the artifact, the more physical act of information. So this is the core of ArchiMate. This is a summary. There are much more concepts so that you're able to model more rich models. Apart from the concept, there's also a few extensions for ArchiMate that make ArchiMate a more complete language for enterprise architecture. There's the implementation and migration extension that you want to use to model, to make supportive models for the phases E, F, and G of TOGAF. And there's also the motivation extension where you're able to model stakeholders, concerns, principles, and requirements. Or as differently, for those of you that understand TOGAF, and I'm sure many of you do, that the ArchiMate core, the business layer, the information and application layer, and the technology layer refers to the phases B, C, and D of TOGAF. The extension refers to the preliminary phase A, and requirements management, and there we have the implementation and migration extension for the phases E, F, and G. So this makes ArchiMate a very complete language for enterprise architecture that supports all phases of TOGAF. So once you have modeled for enterprise architecture this and to be in using ArchiMate, you of course want to communicate about this. Therefore, ArchiMate has a set of viewpoints that they classified as either being decision-making viewpoints for architects, developers, or process designers, decision-making viewpoints for product managers, CIOs, and CEOs, and more informing viewpoints. So ArchiMate enables you to communicate with all these different stakeholders at the various levels of detail. So if you model this all in repository, you can deliver subsets of this total model to different stakeholders. So for an application manager, the most landed view might be interesting. But for a project manager, the third one, so more a select over the various layers, is probably a more interesting view. Or for an end user, maybe all the way to the right, more informal visualization might be more appropriate. Model this into a repository. You can add all sorts of layering. Maybe with colors you can show quality, or maybe you want to show roadmap information as it relays on your model. You can see what objects appear in what period of time. Maybe you want to express your models in a more stable or specific way. All of this, even though you are deriving a bit from the standard, of course, but the communication value is still there. So on the background, it's still ArchiMate. So the organization is benefiting from ArchiMate. Many of them are financial services, government, transport, construction. More we see that enterprise architecture and also the use of ArchiMate picks up in industry, in education. There are various case studies available. Today I present three to you: Achmea, Tata, and one of a public institution in the Netherlands. Of course, ArchiMate from the Netherlands, so and I'm from the Netherlands as well, so that's the easiest place to pick up cases. But our ArchiMate is a global used open standard, so more organizations in Asia, Australia, in South America, for instance Mexico, Brazil, but in Northern America are using ArchiMate at the moment. So far. Is my voice okay now at the moment? I hope it is. Let's see. My audio is cracking. I hope that this is okay now. So for some people, ArchiMate seems to be very design or server, very oriented. Whether this is the case or not, that's a question here from Steve. I'd like to emphasize that ArchiMate is created for high-level design. So this is about not about very detailed process design or very detailed solution design. It's about the relations between the various domains. That's the focus point of ArchiMate, and that's what the most in most cases you will in the most cases. Of course, you can use it also for more detailed design. So it's not that you cannot use it for that, but it is specifically designed for enterprise architecture, so high-level design, focusing on the coherence between the different domains. So it is not oriented in the sense that is about detailed software design or something like that. That is not the case. I hope that answered to your question, Steve. Let's move on to case number 1, because I think most of you came for to hear about the cases. First of all, I will present ArchiMate to you, a case about the usage of ArchiMate in a financial service institution. It's a big insurance company. It's an all-care insurance company. Revenue 2010 about 20 billion euro. They had 5,000 employees. I think they have lost a few, so currently it's about 20,000, I think. What is very specific, I think, or very typical, I think not per se specific for this insurance, but it's in many insurance around the globe, are a result of many mergers. And I used to have this fleet strategy. So they had the different their own market, had their own application landscape, their own HR. Everything was very everyone for themselves. This gives them the ability to just sell any insurance company if they wanted to. But of course, in a certain point in time, when the income from the income dried up, when the competition became bigger, they moved from this fleet strategy towards a more integrated strategy. They focus on just a few brands, and they want to integrate their offices and all their IT. And that's a big shift for a company like this. They have 15 brands, over 150 products and services. It's 250. I think it's much more business processes and many applications. And they selected enterprise architecture as a key strategic instrument to help them to change their business and their IT. So it is very, very complex. Major challenge at first, application portfolio rationalization and also standardization. They want to unbundle the distribution and the production in processes and in the application. So, okay, we have a front office with their own front office brands for markets with their own front office application, and we have a back office that is that comes to legacy applications, and that is more product oriented. They want to improve business and IT alignment, but also very important how the applications are aligned with the infrastructure. And the credit crunch or the euro crisis and everything came after that. That really put pressure on here because the longer they work with these legacy systems, the longer they keep paying for them, of course. So they did an enterprise architecture framework and a process. They use D033, which is a local framework here in the Netherlands. They selected ArchiMate as their enterprise architecture language. So they make their own cocktail of methods and techniques in which ArchiMate plays a very central role. For using ArchiMate, they used what we like to call the EVP suite, Excel, VCO, and PowerPoint, which is great to start off with as an enterprise architecture team, but it's very hard to reuse, to maintain all enterprise architecture assets. It's so very hard to interpretate all these different diagrams and lists. It's a big risk of ambiguity. And adhere to open standards. And this was really important for them to select a language. This was an open standard. Since we're the product of mergers, it's very important that you select something that is relatively neutral. And of course, then an open standard is a good way to go, and it prevents you from a vendor lock-in. They find that ArchiMate is relatively easy to use, and you can start small. That's one of the advices that will be presented later on. That many organizations find it important to start small with a relatively a subset of the language, and then are able to grow when they learn. They want to be able to model consistent, to be able to maintain the the models in a consistent way and do impact of change analysis. To start off with a 2-day training for at first 50 architects. That is typical, I think, 2 days of training. 1 day is very much focused on the framework and on the concepts. Another day more focused on relations and the generation of views for the different stakeholders. They started off in their central IT department with the technical infrastructure. And this one because this is where the EA initiative was coming from. This is where it had influence, where was the business case. And it was much harder to push enterprise architecture into the lines of business. Not only on the application layer, but to let everyone model out their processes in the divisions. That was a tough job. And all the models are put into a central repository, and this was not just a way to integrate the models, it was also a way of knowledge sharing. And they could integrate the models and create over the different LOBs. Some examples. These are process models, different layers, different levels of abstraction, all integrated in this one repository. And they can also create layered views of the application layer. So on the first one we saw business processes. Here we see business functions related to different applications and application services in the various layers. And we have an interaction layer and a transaction layer. And those still very high level ArchiMate usage, but on the technical infrastructure layer, they decided to dive into that a bit deeper. This is where they started, and this is where they used to use very format Visio way of diagramming. So they needed to extend ArchiMate or create a sort of user profile where they want to distinct their technical layer into 2. So they have the blue, which is about application-specific technology, and the orange stuff. This is what they express within this insurance company, the application-agnostic technical infrastructure, so more generic technical infrastructure. In this case, they are able to do analysis from the top down, which you see on the left, and from the bottom up. So they can make 2 ways of impact analysis. It was not easy to implement ArchiMate here. In the different lines of business, there was this sort of not invented here idea, and this was tough. So there was real change management required. It is important to focus the architecture team on the delivery of value and on the creation of models rather than talking about methods and tools. If you keep talking about the selection of methods, if you keep discussing about modeling conventions, you will lose momentum. And it's also the point 4 there. Just enough just-in-time approach was a really important thing here. Pilot projects helped a lot to create real-life experience, work on success stories, create practices inside the organization. So that's something I would advise you to do as well. Training of the people in the language and the tool was an important step. And one of the things they implement in this insurance company is the project start architecture. So this means that from the EA team, they deliver to every project a slice out of the repository as is and the to-be state, only of that piece of the architecture that is relevant for this project. So with that, they deliver both value and as a starting point, but also they deliver direction to these projects. So these projects understand what way they need to move from an architectural perspective. So this is a very commercial, company. They wanted to implement enterprise architecture and the usage of ArchiMate as a way to reduce complexity in the organization. And the same thing, or the same case, was built in this public sector organization. They want to do the lower complexity in their organization, both on processes, also in their products, in their models, but also in the application landscape. Again, a very big organization. It's a tax and customs organization. Many architects, big application landscape, very complex, of legacy systems, and they get new legal tasks from the government. Work very act-oriented, so per act they had different systems, and they are shifting the organization towards a more client process-oriented way of working. And that really means something for their products, for the processes, for the application landscape, and in the end also for the technical infrastructure. It's very complex and it affects their ability to change, so it's really hard to get insight in what it means, what the impact is of various the various changes proposed. What was very interesting and was both a good thing but also sometimes a bad thing, that they have a long tradition of modeling. So that means that for many people it was easy to understand ArchiMate and to get used to work with models. On the other hand, it's very hard because you have to unlearn people's stuff. They have to forget about certain ways they were used to model. And in this long tradition there was not very integrated way of modeling, so everybody can model their own thing, and now all of a sudden they had to integrate their models and they had to work together, and of course that's a change. So the rate of well-integrated models was very high because of these new legal tasks that they were getting. They were participating in the ArchiMate project already at the start, so a small team that was already used to ArchiMate and understand the background of it, and they started from there, from the ArchiMate project with Visio stencils, with PowerPoint, and after a year or two they started to buy tools and decided on an enterprise-wide rollout of ArchiMate, also in together with TOGAF. Their business function model is a very, very important model in this organization, and they created two views of it, both a hierarchy view, of which you see a part here, and there's also a graphical nested view, which is very clickable and a more dynamic way of presenting it, both coming from the same repository. They model business objects, which is I think something that most organizations tend to do, and then they are able to create cross-reference diagrams between the objects and the functions, and where objects are used to what function. Blur this one, sorry about that. But they want to see and they want to analyze the process. Are we using what application? And they want to do that very graphical, so that they can see in the blink of the eye, they can see where are we using a lot of applications and where are we having a very very clean landscape, and that gives them some idea about where they want to invest their money in getting rid of legacy. Still, of course, everybody's still learning. I find it very important that ArchiMate helps them to in the communication with architects over the boundaries of their own domain, also from architects to designers, to be able to have a formal language to communicate about. And also this governmental organization has to work together with other governmental organizations, and then a standard is a very handy thing to be able to share models over the boundaries of your organization, to connect the different models. There are questions on where enterprise architecture ends and where the detailed design starts. These discussions were always there, but with the implementation of ArchiMate, this discussion came to the surface. First, this seemed to be a bad thing, but later on, everybody understands that this is a discussion that needs to be cleared and that everybody has to understand and has to be defined. A good starting point for that is that you talk about roles and about products that the different stakeholders have to deliver. So what is the actual role of an architect and what actual role of a designer? What sort of products do they deliver? And then from there, you can connect the languages, and after that, you can connect the tools. It's a very unwise way to start from the tool perspective. So I would say start from the product perspective and then integrate it further. If you have views, you don't know what to model. So an important lesson learned here is that you have to start from the perspective of your stakeholder. What do we need to tell them? What are the goals that we have with our enterprise architecture? What are the goals that they have? If we know what we want to communicate to them, or what sort of stuff we want to communicate, then we understand what sort of stuff we need to model inside the repository. So that's a very important lesson here. Don't start from ArchiMate and see, oh, I got 40 concepts, let's see what I can model. Always start from the other way, from people you want to influence, and then backwards towards ArchiMate. Standardization of the language was a major change for the individual architect. And for some people it was more formal modeling, for others it was less detailed modeling. So for everybody, every architect, it was a change. Also the way of modeling one views or in Visio just very much focused on the presentation. This is more focused on the repository and maintenance. This really is a change. And you get something back for that, because once you have it in the repository, you can reuse it. So the last case I will present today is the one from Tata Steel. It's a very big organization. It's one of the fastest growing and most respected corporations. It's in India, but they have 400,000 employees worldwide. They work in 80 countries, and they have 7 major industry sectors. And ArchiMate was implemented in Tata Steel Europe mainly, and is used in multiple projects, especially in the IJmuiden plant, but it's also used to integrate the IJmuiden plant, the IJmuiden processes with other processes around Europe. So Tata Steel focuses on the automotive, construction, energy, power, lifting, and excavation market, but also packaging, retail, and a bunch of other industries are very important for Tata to deliver their specialized steel products. But they are not focused on standard steel, which is very hard to compete in the market of standard steel against the low-cost labor countries in the East. So Tata Steel Europe focuses on high-quality specialties. So enterprise architecture at Tata Steel has a history that goes back until 2008, where they selected EA, where they selected ArchiMate as their enterprise architecture modeling language, and they selected the tool for the usage of ArchiMate. They did some first trials, and they created a work group. EA Core is currently known as EA at Work, and this is an internal group, an internal community of architects for knowledge sharing and also for standardization of their methods and techniques. They maintain conventions within Tata Steel. So after the usage of ArchiMate became more and more a practice, they also were in need of a standardized way of working, and that's where they logically ended up with the other standard in the open group, which is TOGAF, as an enterprise architecture framework. So why was enterprise architecture and why ArchiMate at Tata Steel? To change their organization from Chorus, which is a merger of British Steel and Dutch Hoogovens, and now they were before they were well integrated in that merger, they had to integrate with Tata Steel and had to the synergy. and the opportunities from the merger expected. There was a new operating model, and they created the group of information services, so the big IT division in the organization, in which information management and IT is combined, or both IT demand and supply are combined. There are big strategic developments, and there's a bunch of large projects, including the supply chain transformation project, Customer First, and ArchiMate 2012. So a lot of developments in the organization, and this goes rather fast, so they need to be able to integrate all these different, to be able to show the relations between all these different initiatives. So they start off with a bunch of enterprise architecture workshops to direct, to design, and also to be able to actually do enterprise architecture. A lot of workshops were focused on the process of enterprise architecture, but the model and conventions are focused on the ArchiMate part of it. And they integrate enterprise architecture into the processes of the total IT organization, and they set the relations between EA and project management. On the right bottom, you see that they created an HTML intranet page where they communicate about their enterprise architecture results. So this is accessible for everybody in your organization. So within Tata Steel Europe, they're manager of enterprise architecture and strategy. Officially no staff yet, but there's a contractor, and there are 3 people that spend time for EA at work. So this is the community that creates and maintains the enterprise architecture. Very much focused on knowledge sharing. This is a very successful group in the organization, and this really helps to drive enterprise architecture forward. 40 analysts and designers. So officially these are not architects, but they have the architecture role. And they are currently using ArchiMate in their regular work. Helps them to integrate and to understand and maintain these models. The one project that they are using ArchiMate in is the supply chain transformation project. This focuses on standardization and the improvement of processes in IT. And this has to help them to improve their efficiency, to make effective use of all the production resources. And yeah, of course, there's a very competitive market. There's an economic crisis, and cost reduction is a very big driver. Also, there's a headquarters that says we need to standardize our supply chain. So they have different lines of business, or different plans actually, and these different plans have their own processes and their own IT. So even within their own organization, it's rather complex, and they have a lot of legacy. So this is hard to integrate. But the end vision in 2016 to have one standardized way of working, including standardized package solution, easier to maintain, state-of-the-art technology, and cheaper. They do not have the idea that they can get totally rid of their legacy, but to unbundle their legacy from the standard package. So ArchiMate is currently used to create the application footprint. This is the high-level process and application architecture. So the relation between the process domain and the application landscape is very important here. So first, we model the state. So how are the processes related to each other? How are the processes related to the application landscape? We indicate per process which application should be support that process in the future, and we visualize the target architecture landscape and interfaces. Some examples of that. So this is the total application, the total process landscape, and the processes here are nested on top of the business functions. And with one push on the button, we get an easy insight in what stuff is actually in scope of this project and what is out of scope. And this is, of course, a very important discussion at the start of a project. What are we actually going to do and what are we going to touch? In more detail, we model out the processes and we show the flows between the processes. Then say, how are the processes on the left related to the applications on the top? This is just clicking boxes to be able to show this, present this in a more graphical way with colors. So in this view, you see again the processes, the different flows between the processes, but now we map the application landscape in terms of colors onto the processes. And it's very to see now that in the middle there is one process that may use of 5 applications. And it's this green application that's supporting a lot of processes, not surprisingly SAP. And all the way on the right, you see that there's again a process that is supported by a lot of different applications. And that is an indicator. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's an indicator for further investigation, whether there are opportunities to reduce the complexity. We can dive into that a bit deeper, where we can say, okay, within SAP, what sort of modules do we see there? What sort of logical application components? How does this relate to our MES systems and to our GDA, our planning tool, or even high level? And we model the different flows between the applications on a very high level or on a very detailed level. And we can express, in this case with a color, the complexity, how complex these data flows are. All the green are very simple, and the orange or red ones are very complex. And as they have created an HTML intranet page in which they present about their enterprise architecture so that everybody in the organization actually uses it. So it's not just that they give rules to projects, it's very accessible and very open, especially in these in times with a lot of changes. This is a sort of stable reference point for Tata Steel. Of course, then the application landscape 2016 is a very important thing that they refer to over and over again, and that they want to see if everything they do is still in line with their vision towards this total application landscape. Tata is effective in the community. They learn from different working groups. They attend conferences, also open group conferences, where they present and where they learn from others. They created this internal community, this EA at work. They consider this a big success, knowledge sharing and learning. So not everybody from Tata has to go to these open group conferences. It's just a view because they share the knowledge in the EA at work group. Think big, start small, but don't wait with modeling conventions. It's very important to prevent rework, otherwise people start to become frustrated. I have upon that later on. It's a success to create the role of ArchiMate expert. So everybody went to this training, 2-day training, but some of them did more in-depth study of the language, so they can review the different models, that they can decide or advise on the conventions, and that there is this team that they can go to with questions. For more in knowledge, for a very small group in your organization, can be a good thing, good way to go, especially for larger organizations. Then in Tata Steel, they are quite successful at C-level as well with their enterprise architecture efforts. They say that this is more about communication and political skills to get a foot in the door. But once you are at the C-level, then ArchiMate, so ArchiMate is not your entry ticket, but these more abstract models of ArchiMate can help you to communicate about enterprise architecture and about the complexity and about your vision. So it's not an entry ticket, but it can be a communication tool also at this high level in the organization. There are also available of ArchiMate in higher education, from foundation There's this about enterprise architecture at ACCA, the global body of accountants, and there are many more organizations active with the usage of ArchiMate. So I would like to invite you to present your models and your experiences, maybe on a later webinar or on a conference of the Open Group. And to finish up, some conclusions and benefits experience and some tips. Very important to understand that ArchiMate is more than just drawing diagrams. It's about building a set of models, ideally in a repository, that you can reuse, that you can use as knowledge management, that you can create analysis. It's focused on the insights over the various domains and the relations between these. ArchiMate should be positioned as an umbrella language to a higher level than UML BPMN for integrated high-level modeling and analysis over the various domains. ArchiMate has proven to be a start point and not an end point. So the open standard is a rather safe choice. So if you have all these sorts of discussions on what language you should go for, then it is a safe choice, and it has to be it proven to be a good way to start small. So start with a subset that helps you to deliver value in your organization. Once you deliver that, you can always add new concepts. Just select and learn. Training is required. 2-day training is typical, but for expert role, for instance, you can do more in-depth training. And for many architects, it means a different way of working, not just a new language, but also working from a repository perspective rather than a view perspective. So I advise you to consider the implementation of ArchiMate as a project. It doesn't have to be a big project, but it is a project. So change management, especially in a bigger organization, is an aspect to look at. ArchiMate is for pioneers and for settlers. So first movers are self-starting, is our experience. So they say, oh, horse buggy family, go west. They are self-starting. They search the internet. They help themselves. There's the bigger group of settlers, as we call them. They need more guidance. So as back in days in the US, people went west and they asked around, okay, should we go for corn or grain? Where's the sheriff? That sort of question. So the settlers for ArchiMate ask, what are the conventions? What do we need to do? I advise you to support both. So don't stop the pioneers. Just let them go and learn from what they do, and then analyze that, formalize their way of working in convention documents so that settlers are not waiting too long before they move on with the ArchiMate road. So train people, make cases, pilots, build and document good practices, and give and take from the community. The community is there. You can use the LinkedIn group. You can use consulting services provided worldwide on ArchiMate. Use what is already there. Very important to integrate your modeling efforts. So model your enterprise architecture modeling efforts with your process. For instance, the top ADM or your local implementation of a certain enterprise architecture process. So define what products you should make and what role the various models are playing in these products. Integrate modeling efforts with governance. Validate the models and come to a certain point where we say, yes, this is the 1.0 version. From here we move on. But also integrate your modeling with other modeling efforts like process modeling, more detailed software modeling, etc. Advise you to work there from the perspective of products and deliverables when integrating this, rather than from the perspective of tools or languages. So the starting point should be what is expected to, what sort of value are we expected to deliver, and what sort of products are delivering this value, and from there you can move forward. So ArchiMate has to prove to be useful to bridge the gap between pre-format strategy models, very high-level stuff, most of the time created in PowerPoint, and very detailed solution architecture designs, for instance in UML. There's a huge gap between these, and ArchiMate helps you to bridge this gap. It enhances communication, both inside your organization between architects, between LOBs, but also over the boundaries of your organization with suppliers, with outsourcing partners, with organizations, other governmental organizations, if you are in government, for instance. It's very useful to have a common basis for more detailed modeling, and it's very well supported by tools and service providers. I advise you to relate your ArchiMate models, or all your architecture models, to your operating model. As mentioned in the Tata case, for instance, where they have this new operating model. This is something that is very lively, and this is a big project in the organization, and it helps to relate your EA initiatives and your modeling initiatives to this new operating model. It's the same with your business model. So this is very appealing for high-level business management, and if you're able to relate your enterprise architecture modeling initiatives to this sort of management models, it's very high value if you're capable of doing this. And we have very good experiences when communicating about enterprise architecture at that level, that the relations with your operating and business model are very important. So the conclusions and the tips. I would like to point you to the website of the Open Group. Various websites on ArchiMate, so at the Open Group, archimate.org, and the LinkedIn group, where many discussions about different modeling aspects, the distinction between the various layers, how to use different viewpoints. That sort of discussions very lively at LinkedIn. You can check out OGAF 9 at the website of the Open Group, and of course ArchiMate 1.0. The Open Group ArchiMate forum is looking to release ArchiMate 2.0, including the extensions that I've mentioned earlier, somewhere in Q3. So this probably is going to be October, maybe early November, when oh, this is Q4 already. It's probably the beginning of Q4. Sorry about it. They will deliver ArchiMate 2.0, including these new extensions, and make that official part of ArchiMate. I want to thank you very much on behalf of Business Design, the Open Group, and the ArchiMate Forum, attending this web session. You can always email me at r.blom@businessdesign.com to get more information. You can follow me on Twitter at @blomr, and you can check out Business Design's website. Questions? Let's see. What are the top 8 tools based on ArchiMate? What's the best open source tool? I got a slide on that. Oh, where is it? Where is it? ArchiMate and support. There are free format tools like Visio and OmniGraffle. You can download that from the website of the archimate.org. There's an open source tool that is called Archi, which is focusing on diagramming, making ArchiMate diagram. And there are real commercial tools that provide also different repository support, team support versioning, that sort of stuff. And of course out for Business Design. So I would like to say that Business Design Architect is the implementation of ArchiMate. So this is the first implementation and the most developed one. But there are a bunch more tools in the market, and more vendors are supporting it. So what's the tool? Yeah, it depends on what you like to do, of course, and it depends on what are your requirements. So I'm not saying that I'm not telling you what's the best one. Let's see. Which tool is diagramming? I work for Business Design, so I think you can do that. ArchiMate have any attributes or properties defined in the standard? That is true. That is a question that has here. most tools are able to do this, add attributes, and ArchiMate says that you can add attributes and you can adaptations to the standard. That's what most of the clients do. So most of the clients say, okay, we have application components, for instance, and define what sort of attributes they like to add to an application component. You can make your own. So that was a question of Tim. 1750 applications is a high number. Yeah, that's true, Joseph. Let's see. Any more questions? Who in ArchiMate is being feed? Should be more specific area that adds all the information or objectives. What added business value of the case? I'm not sure what that question was about, Joseph, but the added business value, yeah, that depends on the different cases. In most of the cases, the driver for implementing enterprise architecture or implementing ArchiMate, or at first, of course, then they start off with enterprise architecture, and so they want to steer in an environment that's very complex and that needs to have change. So what people start to do is that they create models, for instance. So they need ArchiMate to be able to create unambiguous models, to do that in repository and to do all sorts of analysis with it. Actual business value then comes from how much the complexity can we reduce. If you can make sort of analysis on a complexity reduction or cost reduction or reuse, then of course that is the business value that is delivered. And it was, for instance, the case with Acmea mostly, the insurance company, which was very much focused on reuse and application portfolio rationalization. So cost reduction is the big one there. In the public sector case, we see that the time to market, so the time to implement new tasks from gave to the public sector organization by the government was high because they had a very complex landscape. Now they have insight created with ArchiMate. They are able to show the impact when they have to scale up a certain process. They understand relatively easy what sort of applications they have to scale up and what sort of technology is impacted by that. So that sort of value you must think about. I hope this is an answer to your question, Joseph. Model capability, Jean-François Timar, starting from the value proposition to the capability to the resources. There is a specific webinar on how to model capabilities with ArchiMate. I think it's still on the web. I can ask Simon if it's still on the Open Group website. Otherwise, I can point it to you. So you can send me an email, Jean-François. I can show you some slides and some cases on that. And I think I might present about that on a Forrester conference, about usage of ArchiMate for the modeling of capability. How the core concepts interact with the ArchiMate extensions regarding the TOGAF cycle. I'm not sure if I understand this question very well, but the ArchiMate extensions are all part of ArchiMate and 100% integrated with ArchiMate. And because of that, ArchiMate supports the various processes, the various phases of TOGAF much more explicit. So it is very well integrated within ArchiMate, and there's also integration with. There's a working group now between the Architecture Forum that maintains TOGAF and the ArchiMate Forum to align TOGAF and ArchiMate even better. So this is something that is. There's much initiatives around. There's a much more questions. So I'm not sure if I can handle them all given time. I just move on. There was a from Hammond. Presentation slide on IT application impacted particular change from the as is. Was this a snapshot from the tool? Yes. Was it input and output from an impact process? Are there any available bridges between ArchiMate tools and UML diagrams? There's no formal relation between ArchiMate and UML, so there are many tools that support this. Also the BizDesign tool, but sure there are many more that support relation between ArchiMate and UML and that have mappings between them. And in many cases you can model that both. And I think that's interesting to take a look at if you are able to import UML stuff to your ArchiMate. It is very important to take the right level of detail. So ArchiMate is about high-level modeling. UML is about much more detailed modeling and much more design focused. So that's an important something to take care of. But yes, this is there are bridges available, and the ArchiMate forum is still working on a more formal way of exchanging ArchiMate and UML models. This is not there yet. Can you even what you mean by operating model? Yeah, I can, but given time, I just advise you to go to buy the book of Ross and Weil from MIT. So Ross, R-O-S-S, and Weil, W-E-I-L-L. That wrote a book that is Enterprise Architecture as a Strategy, in which this concept of the operating model is explained much better. So this is Weil, Enterprise Architecture as a Strategy. Is this presentation available? Can we get a copy of the presentation? I can manage with Simon that Simon can point to the presentation. A fair way is that you send me an email, and then I will send you a PDF of the presentation. Questions about other tools? I'm not able to answer all the questions about the specific tools that everybody is using, because I don't work with all these tools. Many of them do have some ArchiMate implementation, so you can ask the tool vendor, otherwise ask at the LinkedIn group. Maybe there are other users that use the specific tool that you want to use or that you are currently using. Resources available on learning how to apply ArchiMate. One is available. Are there others? Now there are actually two books available. There's the ArchiMate specification from the Open Group, and there is the book that is called Enterprise Architecture at Work from Springer. Now the Longhorst is the one that wrote the book. So it's Longhorst, Enterprise Architecture at Work, and the Enterprise Architecture, the ArchiMate technical specification from the Open Group. There's also a resource that might be helpful to you at archimate.org. That is ArchiMate Made Practical, Good Practices for ArchiMate. This is in PDF available at archimate.org. I think that was give time. I think I'm going to skip the rest of it. There's 10 more. So please send an email. See some people putting the email in the chat. This chat is not going to be stored, so please send me an email and I will send you the copy of the slide pack. Um, so is ArchiMate more suited for TOGAF or IA? Both. So in ASICs, ArchiMate is architect process agnostic. So it doesn't matter whether you use the process of DYA or the process of TOGAF or the process or any other method. ArchiMate focuses on the product of enterprise architecture, so the modeling. It is more and more becoming aligned with TOGAF. So I think that's the answer. So you can use both, but it's becoming more and more aligned with TOGAF. Does the working group require membership of the open group? It does. So if you are a member of the open group, then you can participate in the ArchiMate forum and in ArchiMate forum working groups. There is, of course, always the option that you attend a conference of the open group, and via that you enter as a guest inside the working groups. So that's also one of the option that you got. So the best is to send an email to the open group and ask whether you can join and how you can join the ArchiMate group. Then question: why the Chicago skyline? I don't know. This is behind house style, and at a certain point in time we had the Chicago skyline, and I think it's a beautiful skyline and big skyscrapers, and soon in time this design will have one of those. We have currently an office in Toronto, which also has a good skyline, not from the water actually. The question on skyline was the last one for today. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks to the open group for the facilities. Thanks Simon, and I wish everybody all the best and good luck with your enterprise architecture efforts, your EM modeling efforts, and I hope to see you at one of the open group conferences or at any other occasion. Thanks very much, and all the best.